airstrikes in Tehran, targeting dozens of command centers linked to Iran's internal security forces and the Basij militia, which operates under the Revolutionary Guards. Israeli Air Force jets acting on intelligence dropped dozens of munitions on facilities used by the regime and support operational decision-making. The military says it also struck Iran's ground forces supply and logistics directorate, as well as missile lines and other military systems, vowing to continue to degrade Iran's military infrastructure. Explosions were reported across Tehran and in other Iranian cities, including Isfahan, Shiraz, and Qom, as the conflict continues to escalate. Military history was apparently made during these attacks. In a dogfight in the skies above Tehran, the IDF says an Israeli Air Force F-35 jet shot down an Iranian Yak-130, which is the world's first shoot-down of a manned fighter jet in combat by an F-35. We'll have more on that in a minute. In other war news, an Iranian naval ship was reportedly sunk by a submarine off the coast of Sri Lanka, with Reuters citing authorities there saying 78 people were wounded in the incident, with another 101 crew members said missing. No one has yet claimed credit for that attack. At a White House meeting with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, President Donald Trump was asked about regime change in Iran. The problem, he said, is finding an acceptable replacement for the slain leader Ayatollah Khamenei. Trump warned the worst-case scenario would be a new Iranian leader as bad as the previous regime, saying you go through this and in 5 years you realize you put somebody in who's not better. Here's Trump.
Well, most of the people we had in mind are dead. So, we had some in mind from that group that is dead. And now we have another group, they may be dead also, based on reports. So I guess you have a third wave coming in. Pretty soon we're not going to know anybody.
All right, I have to tell the viewers, we have just received on our phones a notification from Home Front Command here in Israel of incoming a rocket or drone attack coming our way. So we are going to have to get ready to go into the shelter here in our studios in Rishon LeZion. I'm going to ask all our who will be coming on to stay connected. We're going to relocate in our shelter and to try to continue the broadcast from our shelter. So please stay with us. We may be cutting off from you for a few moments, a minute or a couple of minutes, but we will come back and we will continue our newscast as we await our what may be a unfortunately incoming rocket attack. So let me just check with my producer. Are we going now? Yes. Am I connected to any of our guests? Right. All right, so I'm probably going to come straight to you then. And I hear, okay, gentlemen, can you all hear me? Relic, Chuck?
I can hear you.
All right, I'm now in the bomb shelter, so I'll probably have to just move things up. I'm going to start with Mayan Hoffman, then I'm going to go to Relic and this as we await. And I'm ready to broadcast. All we ready to go?
Go to my
Gil, can you hear me?
So, Kalev, I think they want you to come to me so that we can speak about what's going on right now, which is the first time that we've seen incoming rocket fire both Hezbollah and Iran simultaneously at the
Right,
same
I'll
time.
come to you in a minute, Maya. Yes, I will. Don't worry. I'm going to come right to you. But Gil, can you hear me? Tom, I can't hear Gil. Am I in touch with Gil? Can you hear me? Mine, Gil.
Checking if you get this.
Yes. Yes, but tell us about the situation.
So, Kalev, I'm actually out at the hospital. I'm here again to do the underground dispatch center, as I said earlier today. That's in Ramla, which is central Hezbollah. The thing that's happening now is while you're in the bomb shelter, is simultaneous fire from Hezbollah and Iran at the same time, fired on Israel from both directions. We first got a recognition warning that there would be sirens. Those sirens didn't go off. It appeared to be a false alarm, but only moments later, rocket fire came from both Hezbollah and Iran simultaneously. Large explosions from over the central city of Hebron. There are reports still, Magen David Adom is not sending negative direct reports of injuries, but we know that there are more sirens and more rockets expected to come any moment now as well. Earlier today, this follows a series of rocket fire that happened in the morning. We were sent into our shelters early, which is critical, and we had a several hours delay. I want to remind you that this comes after a day where several fragments fell directly on central Israel. There were no direct injuries, but people were injured running to their shelters yesterday. Magen David Adom treating about 45 people on Tuesday. Today, letting us know that around 1,200 Israelis have so far been treated in the hospital just Sunday. Of those, 96 were in the hospital, 4 of them in serious condition. They're saying now that there were 5 rockets from Lebanon just now with the latest siren and 1 from Iran.
All right, Mayan. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm just checking on what's happening. Okay, so we are still here in the shelter in the studio here, Mayan. Mayan, I'm going to ask you to stay on, but I want to see if we can go to Professor Chuck Freilich, who's a former member of Israel's National Security Council. He's actually speaking to us from the U.S., so he is not in the shelter. Chuck, can you hear us? Right. So, Chuck, maybe you could comment. We now are seeing Hezbollah really go all in, in joining Iran in attacks on Israel. We should say that Prime Minister Netanyahu did a very explicit warning to Hezbollah that Israel was going to be hitting them hard if they got involved. We've seen unprecedented warnings from the Lebanese government against Hezbollah, telling them not to get involved, and yet here we see Hezbollah has joining full force in the attack. What do you think is the calculus there, and what do you think are the possible consequences for Hezbollah?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that this is yet Hezbollah going in full in. The number of rockets so far is comparatively small. They only have 20% of the arsenal that they had 2 years ago, before Israel, a year and a half ago, before Israel launched the campaign against them in the fall of 2024. We did succeed at the time in destroying about 80%. But 20% of an arsenal of 150,000 projectiles still leaves them with a very, very big number. And they could open fire with at least a significant part of that in the course of the war now. I think in the first few days, Hezbollah was trying to stay out of this if they possibly could. But in the end, this is an organization which was established by Iran really for precisely this scenario when the U.S. and Israel are launching an attack which presents a threat to the Islamic Republic, to the regime itself. And this is a war which for Iran, the Iranian regime, is an existential one. And so indirectly it is for Hezbollah as well. So I think we had to expect that they would they would join the fray. And the question is also whether they haven't actually misplayed their hands, maybe for lack of choice, but played into Israel's hands because there is a strong logic for Israel wanting to take advantage of this to put an end to Hezbollah.
Chuck, what would that entail? Because we did see Defense Minister Israel Katz say that there would be some ground operations by the IDF in Lebanon, something, of course, we haven't seen since the end of the war, or at least to this extent, since the ceasefire agreement last year. So how far can Israel go here? What would Israel's strategic goal or limit be if this continues?
Well, I think first of all, the biggest question is how this war ends with Iran. So far, things are going as well as could be expected, maybe more so. And if that's the case, or to the extent that that's the case, then it is an opportunity to go and try and never completely eliminate rocket, but to eliminate Hezbollah as a military threat of any significance to Israel, and maybe force it to go the political route in Lebanese life, or maybe even see the organization disintegrate. We have already staged forces in southern Lebanon in a mostly protective posture. The question is how far now we will have to go. If the goal then becomes to really try and put an end to the Hezbollah threat, and this is a unique opportunity to do so, then we may have to go in rather deeply on the ground as well, not just an air campaign.
Chuck, we do see the Lebanese government, the Beirut government, speaking, having some tough words for Hezbollah, telling them they have to cease all military activities, lay down their weapons. It's probably the toughest language against Hezbollah we've heard yet from the central government in Beirut, but that's tough talk. What about action? Do you think this is likely to push the Lebanese government, especially its army there, to finally stand up against Hezbollah?
I don't really believe that they have the capability to do so. Lebanon is a country which was taken hostage by a terrorist organization some decades ago and has since been living in fear under the thumb of that organization. And of course, I'm talking about Hezbollah. Now, what we have seen in the last year and a half is that for the first time, because Israel is so hard, for the first time there was strong talk, increasingly strong talk, on the part of the government, demands that Hezbollah finally change its behavior and maybe even dismantle. And now it's even more so because Lebanon doesn't want to have to keep paying the price repeatedly for Hezbollah's wars, so to speak. I think Lebanon, to a certain extent, I mean, nobody wants to be hit, but to a certain extent, it was an Israeli operation that releases them of this bondage, if you will.
Right. Chuck Freilich, I'm going to ask you to stay with us. I do want to see if I can go back to our Mayan Hoffman, who is there at the command center. Mayan, can you hear me? I'm sorry, I'm not hearing Mayan.
I'm with you, Colin. Sorry.
Okay, now I can hear now. Do we have Mayan Hoffman?
Yes, you have Mayan on the line.
Okay, so then Mayan, we're gonna come back to you. I'm sorry, we'll come back to you. I want to go back to Chuck Freilich.
Okay.
Chuck, we heard President Trump speak the other day, still sounding very determined to continue on with the war, despite the fact there's a lot of political debate where you are in the U.S. Certainly, I don't think you could call this a popular war, but so far, despite all the opposition certainly among Democrats, certainly some members of his own MAGA, some members of his MAGA coalition. How determined are you, do you think President Trump is to continue this, even up to, for example, he's talked about going another 3 to 4 weeks with it. Does he have the political capital to do that, or stand up to the political forces that are pressing him to shorten the war?
Well, first of all, if I can just say, I think there's some technical problem because there is a matter in the background which makes it almost impossible to hear you.
Okay, hold on, Chuck. I'm going to ask our other guests in waiting. Please mute your microphones and go back to Chuck. Freilich and Chuck now. Maybe that's better.
Yeah, it is. Look, I think you're asking the million or billion-dollar question here, and that is, does President Trump really have the personal fortitude and the political wherewithal to stay the course? Now, I don't know exactly how long staying the course is, but it is a matter of weeks, at least, and the president spoke of weeks. But there is a great deal of pressure against him, against this war. The polls show it most a quarter of the American public in support of this. And the Iranians are wisely, maybe unwisely, the Iranians are trying to by actually attacking the Gulf states and creating at least a temporary energy crisis around the world and at the American pump. And that would create further pressure on the president to stay the course. Look, we are in the early days of the war, at day 5. We need time to do this. If the objective is regime change, which is a questionable objective to begin with, because nobody's ever done it from the air before, then we certainly need time. I think what could happen is when the other Iranian military capabilities are hit sufficiently hard, and that could happen in a matter of days, the president could declare victory. That would certainly be true.
Right. And let me ask you, the Chancellor of Germany, President Trump met with the Chancellor of Germany, Chancellor Merz, yesterday in Washington. The Germans have been at least the most supportive of the U.S. We see, though, some of the other European countries that were initially opposed to the war, France and the UK, which changed its position on the war after one of its bases in Cyprus was attacked. Now, I can just tell you that in the last hour, there were reports of a missile that fired in the direction of Turkey, another NATO country along with Cyprus. Do you see the possibility of a shifting, at least among the governments of Europe, in being more supportive of the war, maybe even contributing to it in some way?
I think you're right in pointing out the trend, at least at the governmental level in Europe. As a matter, the Iranians have, the strategy that I was talking about a minute ago about putting pressure on the U.S. indirectly by attacking the Gulf, the American Gulf allies, by attacking NATO allies, has backfired, and I think it's backfired spectacularly. I even saw one report, I don't know if it's true, that the French are sending their aircraft carrier to the region. But there's a change in sentiment. Certainly Trump needs this kind of international backing if he's going to continue for a protracted war. Again, I think from our perspective, from an Israeli perspective, the danger, though, is that the president declares a premature victory.
Well, again, I'm going to ask you to stay with us. I'm going to see if we can go back to our Mayan Hoffman, who's there in the command center. Mayan, could you give us
because I presume I'm not the only person hearing it. There is constant chatter maybe from your studio.
Yes, I'm Chuck. We're still in the shelter. We're going to be moving out of here, but Mayan, could you give an update on what you know about what's happening, and maybe just a little of the general situation here in Israel to this day? There have been, of course, other alerts during this day.
Yes, as we said, there were simultaneous fire both from Iran and from Hezbollah at the same time. A total of 5 rockets from Lebanon and 1 from Iran. All of them were intercepted successfully, and currently Magen David Adom, our first responders, are saying there are no reports of injuries. There are reports of potential shrapnel that have fallen in some in other areas. We're waiting for the final update of that. This obviously comes in the aftermath of a number of attacks that did hit down. I just want to say that where I am right now in the Magen David Adom Ditch Pass Center, I am several floors underground, under shelter. This is a very special center that was only recently built. The purpose of the shelter was to ensure that with the blood bank, the breast milk, and of course the 101, the calls for emergency response, was able to be dispatched even in times of war like this with Iran. So he's asking to act here with people working and responding to calls. And many times the president is here today. Senior military officials are often operating out of the area. Meanwhile, I just want to go over the fact that we've seen several direct hits in other locations that are not just mostly in the center of the country, Bnei Brak, Petah Tikva, and Beit Shemesh. In total, we have had Beit Shemesh, where there was a direct hit yesterday, was also the location where 9 people were killed just a couple days before. And in total, there have been 11 people killed in this war. At this point, hopefully, innocent people can leave their shelters. And I think I'll get back up. We can speak a little bit about the Purim holiday.
Okay, Mayan, this is
would you
Kalev.
like me to speak to you a little bit about Purim and the and
Yes,
Sure,
go
I'd be
ahead,
happy to-
Mayan.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So today is Shushan Purim. It's Purim in Jerusalem, and just to keep going with those home front command directives, many people rush to Jerusalem celebrate the second day of the holiday. But this year, in fact, there are limited ways even to get to Jerusalem. So, for example, the Ministry of Transportation has put out that there will still only be trains and buses running on the hour to call on citizens not to travel to Jerusalem to celebrate the holidays, but rather to stay close to their shelters in order to alleviate any danger from the incoming rockets in this flight just now.
And Hoffman there. I would like just to remind our viewers we're trying to do this broadcast in the midst of an air raid siren, and so I'm just going to have to ask your patience for that. Mayan Hoffman, thank you for that. I want to go back and see, do we still have Chuck Freilich with us?
Here.
Okay, Chuck, thank you so much. I want to get just your feelings just basically on the general direction of how you feel the war is going, Chuck. We do see, certainly on a military level, in the success that Israel and the U.S. have had to neutralize Iran's military capability. But the whole question of potential regime change, are we really any closer to that? And I perhaps also relate, there was a very interesting report today saying that the CIA has been in contact with Kurdish leaders of the Kurdish, I guess you can call it, underground in Iran, and also Kurdish militia groups in Iraq, with the idea of perhaps arming those groups and giving them some military support to stage some kind of revolt within Iran in order to maybe weaken the regime and allow for regime change. How practical do you think that is, and how much closer do you think all this military activity and success has actually brought us to potential regime change in Iran?
Well, that's a critical question. One of the problems here from an American and Israeli perspective is that the Iranian regime, for all of the fact that a large majority of the Iranian public opposes it and would like to see either partial or complete regime change, there is still a hardcore of maybe 20% of the people who support it fully. And the regime itself is deeply embedded in Iranian society, and with firm control of the forces of coercion. They have the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards, and the Basij, which is a militia, which is really part of the Revolutionary Guards, which is deployed throughout Iran, every city and town in the country, precisely for these scenarios, to put down popular unrest, and especially any attempt to overthrow the regime. And it's important to remember that this isn't just another regime the Islamic Republic defines itself as the embodiment of the divine word on earth. So that anyone trying to topple it is sort of trying to topple the big guy, if you will. And that means that it gives the regime, from its perspective, the legitimacy to do anything and everything necessary to stay in power. And so we saw the mass slaughter just a month and a half ago. And it will get much, much worse than that if they feel that they really are facing an existential danger. I would say that until now, I have been very, very impressed by the extraordinary level of coordination between the U.S. and Israel, the joint planning that took place for this operation. Certainly, in terms of the military level, the question we're now facing is whether there was really that kind of advanced planning for the second stage, the regime change stage. If the reports are correct that there are the contacts with the Kurds and maybe other opposition groups are just starting now, say that that's worrisome in terms of the advanced planning. If these contacts reflect more advanced preparations, then maybe we are a little bit closer than we were. But still, regime change is a huge undertaking, and it's not at all clear that we will succeed in achieving that.
Thank you for joining us so much here on ILTV. And again, I'm sorry for the technical issues, but of course, as I said, we're running back and forth to the shelter. That is a challenge.
Yeah, it will.
Now, earlier in the broadcast, I did report of this dogfight, apparently, that took place in the skies over Tehran, in which an Israeli F-35 jet shot down an Iranian fighter jet. This is a historic dogfight. First time, apparently, an F-35 in combat has shut down a manned other jet. Well, for more on this, I want to go to one of Israel's legendary Top Gun pilots, Israel Relic Shafir, someone who took part in, for example, the raid on the Osirik, the Iraqi reactor in Osirik, and himself has recorded several kills in dogfights. Relic, thanks you for joining us. First of all, put us into context. What does it mean? Why is it historic, apparently, this battle that took place in the skies above Tehran?
Well, this particular battle was not really a dogfight. The F-130, the jet that was down, is a trainer rather than a fighter. But still, as far as pilots are concerned, I would say the utmost goal for a fighter pilot is to go into a dogfight and shoot another plane. In this case, I figure that this particular airplane was taking off maybe from Tehran to some other base. Maybe the base commander was flying the airplane, wasn't aware at all that he is picked up by a fighter through radar. But on the F-35's radar, a plane flying, let's say, at around 350 knots, that is not an Israeli fighter in the Tehran area, for instance, is always a hostile. And he probably spotted this plane. It looks like a little fighter, even though it's a jet trainer, and he shot him down. So I guess it's not what we mean when we say dogfight.
All right, well, it wasn't. It still is apparently though the first time an F-35 shot.
It'll go into the books as shooting down a jet, and the pilot will have his day, and we'll celebrate upon landing before he takes off again for this sortie. So,
right.
yeah, and
I'm just gonna
having another coming on.
Yes, we have another air raid alert, but in another couple of minutes left. It does raise a question, though. Where is the Iranian Air Force? I mean, where are their fighter jets and their pilots? Why haven't we seen more action from or resistance from them during this conflict?
Well, the Iranians don't really have an air force to speak of. They had some old F-5s and Phantoms and about 8 MiG-29s that weren't operable. They opted for the ballistic missiles and did not really invest in Air Force. They figured they couldn't buy spare parts. They couldn't really train. And so they gave up on the Air Force altogether right after the Revolution '79. So they don't really have an Air Force to speak of, and it wasn't part of the conflict anyway.
Right, and I was also surprised in reading about this that this is the first time we've even had any kind of mid-air combat involving the Israel Air Force since the mid-1980s. Is that correct? 1985, which is it seems quite a long time since for the Air Force to go without this kind of action.
Well, that is true, and that is because the adversaries, some of them became friends, like the Egyptians, and some of them, like the Syrians, realized that they took such a beating in 1982 to 5, something like 100 to 0 in shooting down their Air Force. They decided not to invest in the Air Force, and they flew very little and didn't have an Air Force to speak of. At least as fighter jets are concerned. They did have fighter helicopters that on their own people during their civil war in the previous decade.
Right.
So no adversaries.
Okay, and again, as we were looking at your phone and I'm at mine, we are getting another alert. How much is, by your estimation, based on the available information, how many missiles or what kind of arsenal missiles and drones does Iran have left at this stage to keep up these attacks that we still are getting fairly regularly in Israel and certainly is hitting other countries in the region, such as the Gulf states?
I think they're running out of missiles and missile launchers. The missile launchers are being hunted down in Israel's areas in the west and northern part, and the rest of Iran by the U.S. Air Force and Navy. And so they're actually went into, I would say, saving mode, in that they would number the amount of missiles they fire so they don't run all out of them. I think they'll be depleted, I guess, by midweek next week. So they're still in the game until about that time, if they keep going at that rate.
Well, we'll have to hope for that, and perhaps Israelis will be getting a break from these constant air siren alerts. Israel Relic Shafir, thank you so much for joining us on ILTV.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And now I would like to go. I believe we have Reserves Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. He is the former international spokesperson for the IDF to international media. Jonathan, and you are with the FDD now as a fellow there. Thank you for joining us. First of all, I don't know if you want to weigh in. I mean, Israel. It looks like the Israeli Air Force had a very productive and busy night there in Iran and Tehran, including, well, it may not have been a dogfight, but it was some historic air action. Maybe talk about what you think. Where do you think the direction of the airstrikes are going now? Where is the strategy moved to now in terms of both the Israeli and the United States air attacks on Iran?
Yes, shalom, Kalev. Good to see you. I think the whole the F-35 is so superior to any other fourth, third, or second generation aircraft. It's not even a fair fight. You know, the other plane, whether it's a trainer or even a fighter jet, they'll take off and totally oblivious of the fact that there's a superior hunter that can engage them from far, far away beyond the reach of any weapon system that is on board a third or fourth generation fighter. So I think it's more of an anecdote, not really substantial. What is substantial, I have alarms in the background. I hope you can still hear me. What is substantial, I think, is where the IDF is shifting, where the Israeli force is shifting its focus. We've seen over the last day and a half that...
Jonathan, I'm interrupting you because here in our studios in Rishon LeZion, there is an air raid alert going off right at this moment. I'm going to ask you to stay with us, and I ask our viewers again patience. We might have to go temporarily suspend our broadcast as we go to the shelter. We are going to try to continue with you as we go to the shelter. You can continue to speak as I go in. Continue to finish your point. So please do, and talk about where we are in the state of the war, and I'll have to pick up with you in a couple of minutes.
Okay. So what I think is substantial here, and I hope that you'll be able to hear me, is that the IDF has shifted in terms of its targeting. As Relik Shafir said, the Israeli Air Force is hunting missile launchers. That is still the most important asset that the Iranian regime has, because that is what they use in order to fire at Israeli civilians, at Gulf states, and everybody else. So that's probably priority number one. However, in addition to that, what we see is the Israeli Air Force attacking regime targets. Regime targets are really the underpinnings of the oppressive apparatus that the regime has against the Iranian civilians. IRGC headquarters, Basij, and additional locations, including targeting the location where they reportedly, Iranian officials had convened in order to count the votes for the election of the new Ayatollah. So these are targets that are not directly related to the, hello Kalev, back again. I'll continue. These are targets that are not directly related to defeating Iran militarily. These are much more political and governance targets, and they, I think, correspond with the Israeli intention of actually paving the way for the Iranian people to be able to regain control over the country and to weaken the regime. Kalev, can you hear me? Okay, so I'll say something in addition to that. I think what's also happening is that the Iranians, I think I agree with Relik Shafir's assessment. I don't know exactly, and I think it's very difficult to put a date on it. When will the Iranians run out of ballistic missiles? That's a top intel priority for Israel and the Gulf region and the US. But I think that they are, in a finite situation. They do not have the ability to import more missiles. They do not have the ability to produce more missiles because they have no control of their airspace or their maritime corridors. Russia cannot supply them. China cannot supply them. And whatever they fire will probably never be replenished. And that's a very important point because at the end of the day, war, first and foremost, is a numbers game.
Right.
It's a logistics game. And the logistics here are not in favor of the Iranian regime. My guess is that they will continue to fire 1, 2, or 3 missiles at Israeli targets, Gulf targets, in order to create that psychological effect and to be able to claim that they're still in the game. But effectively, their ability to fire and really to threaten Israelis and Gulf states, it is diminishing by the day. Their assets are being deteriorated by Israeli and American Air Force, which of course is a good thing.
Right. Jonathan, I'm just checking that you can hear me clearly.
Yes, I can.
I want to get your reaction to a couple of, I think, pretty dramatic reports that came out this morning related to the conflict with Iran. One is just in the last couple of hours, a report, Reuters reporting that they've been told by Sri Lankan authorities that an Iranian naval ship or an Iranian ship was apparently attacked, I would guess torpedoed by a submarine off the coast of Sri Lanka. The Sri Lankan authorities are saying that they rescued, that some 78 people, sailors on that ship were wounded and rescued. Apparently a little over 100 are still missing from that. I want to get your reaction to that. What do you think happened here? Why would there be an Iranian ship off the coast of Sri Lanka? Was it trying to seek safe haven, maybe in an Asian port there? And what do you think is behind this report?
It is very interesting. I read it and was surprised by it myself. The things that come to mind would be perhaps rogue elements of the Iranian Navy, perhaps seeking to flee from the combat zone or to get out of range and stay out of trouble. That's one option. Another option is that this is some type of doomsday scenario, some type of Hail Mary mission, which I still can't really wrap my head around, because there are no important, as far as I know, American or Israeli assets in the region. Perhaps this was a mission by the Iranians to try to interfere with global shipping lanes, similar to what the Germans did in World War II, perhaps in order to sow some kind of panic and to create political and economic pressure by downing a civilian freight vessel, which perhaps would create news and get people to focus on the effects of the war. The Iranians, I think, have at times shown creative thinking and creative action, so I wouldn't put it beyond them. But it is odd. And of course, it's good that whatever they were doing, they were stopped from doing it, most likely. But it definitely warrants additional analysis to understand what they were doing, because if it was a mission that was sanctioned by the Iranian Supreme Command, then there must be some kind of combat or operational logic behind it. And then, of course, there's the assessment that they will try to do it again, or that there are important assets in that area. But definitely interesting.
Right. Another, and this is something that I spoke about with a bit with the previous guest, Professor Chuck Freilich, who used to be on the National Security Council in Israel, a report that the U.S., specifically the CIA, has been in contact with the Kurdish resistance or underground in Iran, particularly in Western Iran, and also with their comrades, the Kurdish militias that are in northern Iraq, with the idea of the U.S. Assisting them, perhaps arming them with heavier weapons in order that they can undertake some kind of military action or revolt against the Iranian regime. I guess with the intention of again, as you discussed, weakening it to the point of regime change. First of all, your thoughts on this as a strategy, and perhaps also does it suggest maybe a shift of the U.S. understanding that in order to effect regime change, they're going to need some kind of boots on the ground. It may not be American boots or even Israeli boots, but some kind of forces within military force in Iran to overthrow this regime.
Yeah, it's a pretty slippery slope. And just for the viewers who may not be aware of the ethnic composition of the modern Islamic Republic of Iran, I think about 68% of the Iranian population are ethnic Persians. The rest are not. And Iran is a very diverse country with many large different ethnic minorities. We have Baluchis in the southeast. We have Azeris close to the Azerbaijani border. We have Sunni Muslims. We have Kurds and many others. The Kurds
And by the way, all of these ethnic minorities have a long history of seeking independence and secession from the Iranian country. So that's been bubbling, and it's been there in the background. It's been effectively oppressed by the Iranian regime for many, many years, and effectively not reaching, the awareness level of most people around the world. The Kurds are, I think, the most organized, with the strongest cohesion and the strongest level of combat capabilities on the ground. I would add to that unconfirmed report that there have also been reported strikes of Iranian targets along the Iraqi-Iranian border, including in the area of Kurdish forces. So that's another, data point. I think it's pretty reasonable to assess that that is something that the CIA would indeed be engaged in. I think it is quite it's a dangerous thing, because that could really develop into a bit of an anarchy. And of course, the CIA and perhaps Mossad and perhaps Israel would want the additional pressure on the Iranian regime. But when you speak about, boots on the ground, I think we have to understand that the Kurds are sectarian and they are confined to their area. I don't think it's likely that that any Kurdish militia or forces will march on Tehran or go out of their native areas where Kurdish people live. The Kurds, you can think of them in similar sense like the Druze in Israel and in Syria. They are confined to their area. They are confined to their land. They're very proud and they're fierce and brave, etc. But they are not expeditionary in their mindset. They are not about conquering other grounds. They're more defensive in the sense of mending for their own. That's why I think it's a pressure that will be applied on the Iranian regime, not something that should worry Tehran. At most, maybe a chunk of Iran will be bitten off. But the bottom line here is that this is part of the dynamics that I think we should anticipate. And the Kurds will not be the only ones. Baluchis, Azeris, Arabs, Sunni Arabs in other parts, I think these are all ethnic minorities. And last thing, of course, armed opposition is the key. You cannot bring down a regime as powerful and as entrenched as the Iranian regime without organized opposition with weapons.
All right, Jonathan Conriquez, former IDF spokesperson of the international media. Jonathan, thank you very much for your patience and helping us out during this trying situation to do a live broadcast. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Jonathan.
Stay safe. Thank you. Stay safe, Khalid. Bye-bye.
Now, thank you, Jonathan. Now, another aspect of this conflict is the concerted attack by the Iranian on oil and gas facilities in the Gulf, trying to generate an energy crisis, presumably with the intention of it pressuring President Trump to end the war. Now, joining us is Simon Henderson. Simon is an internationally recognized expert on energy matters. Simon, I'm speaking to you from a bomb shelter here in Israel, so I don't have unfortunately, I don't have my prompter or your credits. You can add those if you wish to. But thank you for your patience in this situation. Simon, let me first of all start a question you're more qualified than most to answer. Given what's happened in the Gulf right now, is the world in an energy crisis?
It's not at the moment, but it's about to be if things don't get better soon. The challenge is that it is twofold. One is that there's fighting going on in the Gulf, missiles, drones, whatever it is, which and the other is that we don't know how this is going to develop. The fighting means that the export of oil from the Gulf, which is about 20% of world's oil, and a much higher proportion of the amount of oil which is actually traded around the world. That is sort of stuck in the Gulf at the moment because the insurers do not want to pay the higher premiums for it to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, if things clarify positively and optimistically in the next day or so, then these tankers will be able to leave. And the potential oil shortage in the world will decline and prices will recover. But for the moment, we're in a big question mark scenario.
Right. And let me ask you, what is the impact on, that's the globe, the impact specifically on, for example, these countries in the Gulf, which we know the UAE, the Saudis, Qatar have quite a bit of sway with President Trump. How badly are they suffering? How much punishment are they willing to take in order to achieve maybe the strategic goal of finally seeing the threat of Iran removed from the Gulf?
Well, great question, because the way you pose it gives the answer anyway, which is Iran is always going to be in the Gulf, and they are always going to be in the Gulf. They just need to have a new modus vivendi, and for the moment they don't have it. They have been shocked by Iranian attacks, and they're hoping to recover quickly. But even if you haven't been there, you will have seen the pictures of it. The Gulf Arab states, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, they're made up of buildings with a lot of glass. And drones and glass buildings don't go together well. And so we're in a very perilous situation for the moment.
Transitioning out of the shelter, do you still hear me?
I still hear you, and I saw a lot of the palm of your hand as you transited from one place to the other.
Okay, well, we're trying to set up here now, back in the studio. Thank you for your patience, Simon. I want to ask you about the price of oil. There's a lot of talk about it shooting above $100 a barrel. I believe that currently we were at the $85 a barrel. How likely do you see that, for example, going up? And where will that translate? Besides the price of gasoline, there's a lot of concern about natural gas shortages in Europe, which is so dependent, especially during the winter months. So how do you see this playing out in the immediate future now, given what's happened so far?
Well, the price has ticked up a bit, but it's really waiting for some clarification on whether supplies are going to restart smoothly. And the current anticipation is that it will clarify within a few days. But the danger is that if things get worse, the price will shoot up. And yes, okay, we're at about $84 a barrel now for the Brent, the most widely traded oil, for delivery in 3 months' time. But if there's going to be a total blockage of the Strait of Hormuz, or an almost total blockage, then it will shoot up more, perhaps even over $100. And yes, that is reflected, or will be reflected, at prices at the pump. You and I will have to pay more for our gasoline, petrol, call it what you will. On natural gas, the major source of natural gas in the Gulf is either Iran, which doesn't have the ability to export natural gas, or just across the Gulf, Qatar, which is one of the major exporters of natural gas. And for the moment, Qatar has stopped producing natural gas because of some drone attacks at its natural gas installations. It would have an impact, a greater impact, at a different time of year, but at the moment we're heading into summer, which means that demand for energy certainly in the northern hemisphere declines. So we might have some relief there, but it's not good news. And we used to be only obsessed with oil and the Gulf. We now need to be very concerned about LNG, liquid liquefied natural gas and the Gulf.
Right. Simon, I want to ask you, there was this report earlier about a ship, which is an Iranian ship that was sunk off the coast of Sri Lanka by a submarine. We don't have any more of the details. One possibility is that this ship belonged to the so-called shadow fleet that is used by some countries, particularly Russia and also Iran, to ship, for example, oil abroad. It was heading, I guess it's in Asian waters, perhaps could have been involved with China. Talk about whether the U.S. Will be targeting this sort of shadow fleet, and also the role of China here, which I guess is the main foreign consumer of Iranian oil, and perhaps how what's happening here may impact on China and maybe force China's hand to be more involved here.
Well, the role that China can play can be big and needn't be big. My sense is that China is unscrupulous and doesn't bear any particular loyalty to Iran or determination to buy Iranian oil. Yes, it needs the oil, but it'll buy it from one of the other Gulf states. Now, Beijing might disapprove of what's going on in the Gulf, but I doubt whether it wants to get militarily involved at all. I saw the attack, or the assumed attack, and as your previous interviewee was discussing, the attack on this Iranian frigate. This doesn't surprise me. If there's a military threat to American forces, they'll take it out. I don't think they'll get themselves bothered with clandestine oil exports at the moment. The military need is very much the priority. And in terms of that frigate, which is now no more, this was perceived probably as being a potential threat against the carrier, the Abraham Lincoln, which is operating in the Arabian Gulf. Where, I don't know, but the carrier group will be somewhere doing circles or figures of 8 or whatever in order to launch strike aircraft against Iran. And part of the carrier group is not only the carrier itself, but also a submarine. And it might have been that submarine which took action against the Iranian frigate.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Simon Henderson, for joining us and for your patience situation here in Israel.
Stay safe.
And now a special message. As the conflict with Iran enters a dangerous new phase, Israel and the United States remain united on the front lines in this fight for freedom. Since the fight began, Iran has unleashed hundreds of missiles and drones at the Holy Land. A missile strike in Beit Shemesh killed 9 Israelis and destroyed a synagogue. Impacts across Israel have left families devastated and hundreds displaced. Millions of Israelis are sheltering under a national state of emergency. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews has been preparing for this moment and is on the ground right now. Reinforced mobile bomb shelters are being deployed. Underground hospitals, emergency operating rooms, and first response teams are being stocked with life-saving medical supplies and protective gear. Nourishing food and baby supplies are being provided to displaced families. In this critical hour, your support helps protect Israel's most vulnerable and stand firmly for freedom and faith. Stand for Israel, stand for freedom. Give generously today to rush your gift. Call 888-488-IFCJ. That's 888-488-IFCJ, or go online at ifcj.org. Thank you for joining us. I want to again thank our viewers for your patience. We're trying to bring you the news live and the latest updates from Israel, and we're doing it in the midst of air raid sirens, rushing to shelters. Sometimes the picture on your screen may not be the prettiest, but you know that you are getting the full and honest picture of what is happening in Israel, what's happening to us Israelis as we deal with these air raid attacks, these missile and rocket attacks on us during the course of this war. So thank you for joining us, and keep watching ILTV. I'm Khaled Ben David. Thank you for joining us.